I'm Matt Weldon. This is Leslie Matthews and Dina Zaror, and we are from August. Leslie and I are on the UX design team, and Dina is going to be helping us at the end during the Q&A phase of the presentation. So tonight we're going to be talking about building HTML prototypes with Sketch and Hype. And as I mentioned a minute ago, if you have questions during the presentation or at the end, feel free to just go on Twitter and use the hashtag AskAugustUX. Or if you're watching online and you're on the live feed, you can send your questions there as well. So as I mentioned, we work for a startup called August here in San Francisco. Before we begin, just wanted to talk a little bit about the August product because we're going to be prototyping some of the screens in our app tonight. So our first product, which launched last year, is called the August Smart Lock. We brought one with us here tonight. I'll demo it here in a second. But I thought it might be cool to begin just for a moment and show off our web commercial. Oh, before I do that, sorry, a couple quick shout-outs. I want to thank Greg Marr and Academy of Art for inviting us, of course. And then I would be remiss if I didn't mention my friend Brian Dills, who about a year and a half ago, is a friend and colleague of mine, just bugged me just endlessly about Sketch and Hype. He's like, dude, these tools are so cool. You got to try them out. So, Brian, you were right. If you're watching online, I'm giving you a full shout-out. So let's watch the August commercial. It'll tell you a little bit about the Smart Lock, and then we will demo it for you. Oh, and you can check it out at august.com.
This is you. That is your home. This is your front door, and that is the lock on that front door. These are the people you let inside your home. The dog walker, the plumber, your two out-of-town friends, your little brother, and her. These are the two people you never let inside that door. One's a professional cat burglar. The other, your insane drunk ex-housemate. This one doesn't think he needs a key. And that one still has one. Let's face it, you don't have time to open the door for everyone. You can't actually, which is precisely why you have August. August is the lock that requires no key, only an invitation. An invitation that you can give and take away whenever you please. Keyless, codeless, and completely secure, August minds your entry when you cannot. You'll be alerted when your invitee arrives, and you'll know precisely when he leaves. No more racing home to let your out-of-town guests in. No more having to ask for keys back. Your lock recognizes you automatically and opens without you having to do a thing. And for your friends, you just create an invitation and press send. Grant access for a day, or a night, or a week, even a month. And take that access away whenever you like. August isn't connected to your wireless router or even your electrical service, so there's no risk of downtime or system failure. Plus, you can always still open your door the old-fashioned way if you like. You just don't have to. Secure, seamless, simple. August. You are invited.
Cool, so that is the August Smart Lock. And this is also the August Smart Lock. In fact, I just realized, stay on mic, I gotta move this over here. So we brought this demo unit today just to show you real quick how it works. This is August, and when you install it, actually on the outside, you can still use your key. You can't even tell that you've actually installed anything. Everything just works normally. And from the inside, you can also actually turn the lock. So once again, still works pretty much like your regular deadbolt did. Single-cylinder deadbolt is what this attaches to. But now, once August is installed, you can also operate it with your smartphone. If you get a shot of that or not. So I'm showing you this partially because in a little bit, we're actually going to build these screens as an HTML prototype. This screen right here is called the keychain screen, and it's got all of the houses that I have access to that have August locks on them, including this one. And then just tap that button. It'll take a second or two to connect. This is the lock screen. And, sorry, this is really hard because I'm not facing. I can tap here. As you can see, lock the door. Tap it again, unlock the door. Sometimes I just like to play with this and just tap it over and over again. And then again, I can't really see the screen, but if you tap these arrows or swipe, you'll see there's an activity screen where you can see all the people who've been operating the lock and what time it happened. And and then there's also a user screen next on the other side, which is where you see all the people who have access to the lock. So yeah, so those interactions that we just showed right there, even the animations and everything else, we're going to build that here in a little bit. But that is August. So first we're going to talk about Sketch, and then we're going to get into Hype. And those are the two tools we're going to be using tonight. But before I do that, I just want to talk about interactive prototypes in general for just a moment. So some of you might be wondering, well, why would you build these things? Why would you build HTML prototypes, interactive prototypes? So there's several reasons, actually. Specifically at August, what we found is, number one, prototypes just in general make your design tangible and immersive. And what I mean by that is you can do a really gorgeous design and you can communicate a lot of things just by making wireframes and mockups and annotating those wireframes and mockups. You can describe animations and behaviors, but without being able to animate that stuff and actually show it to people, you end up creating really dense specification documents, and you also miss out on, for lack of a better term, the immersiveness of actually interacting with something that has real animations and real transitions. And so just in general, on a high level, having a prototype is it's kind of an order of magnitude more intimate than having just comps on paper. So that's the first thing. Next, so several years ago when most design was web design, the transitions between pages wasn't really thought of, mainly because you just load a new web page and the browser handles that for you. But now with mobile apps, as you move around from screen to screen, there's all kinds of different transitions and animations you can do, and different apps do it in different ways, and all that stuff has to be designed. So by being able to prototype it and define those actual animations, you can get really specific with them. You can really get in there and tweak things exactly the way you want them to, and really look at it in high detail and evaluate it that way. So that's the second thing. Next, prototypes can be a reality check. So sometimes you can have a really cool idea in your head and you think you've got a design figured out and how things are going to interact and how you're going to move around. You figure it all out on paper. Then you actually animate it and you build the transitions out and you realize there was something you didn't think of or something that just doesn't work the way you thought it would. And it's really good to catch that stuff well before you actually get into the development phase to save a lot of time. So it's just kind of a sanity check for the ideas you have in your head, making sure that you can actually put them into action and in reality they actually work. Next, and this may be the biggest thing, just as a communication tool, prototypes are just really, really powerful. So there's lots of audiences you can show a prototype to or give it to and communicate, more than you could communicate with pages and pages and pages of specs. So those people include, for us, especially developers. We show stuff all the time to our development team and get feedback from them. When it's time to build stuff, sometimes we'll include a prototype in our spec, and that saves a lot of time and effort in explaining how we want transitions and stuff to go. Also, product and design stakeholders, so people on our team, other designers, we show stuff to each other all the time, get feedback in product meetings, we get feedback that way. And then external audiences too. And for this type of audience, by external, I just mean people who aren't designers or developers. They might be in your company, they might not be in your company. A lot of times, those types of prototypes are more presentation prototypes where you're sort of walking through step by step, A to B or A to Z, this is how this works. We're not going to build that kind of prototype tonight, but you can definitely do it with the tools that we're going to show you. So yeah, prototypes help communicate UI concepts to a lot of different groups. And then finally, prototypes are just good for user testing. You don't have to have them, but if you have them and they're in high detail and they look and behave as realistic as possible, you're not leaving nearly as much to the imagination, and you don't really have to prep your users as much of okay, this is fake, this isn't real, so just pretend that this does this, and you don't really have to do that setup. You can, if you've anticipated the main things that the person is going to do with your prototype, then you can sort of hand it to them and have them pretend that it's real, and get much more honest and unfiltered feedback from them. So those are all great reasons to build prototypes. There's more, but those are the ones that we thought of. So the two tools we're going to walk through tonight, the first one is Sketch 3. And Sketch 3 is, as most of you probably know if you're here tonight, is a digital design tool specifically geared towards web, mobile, and icon design. And those of you who are familiar with Photoshop and or Illustrator, who does that apply to in this audience tonight? I'm just curious. Photoshop, Illustrator users? Yeah, I figured most of you probably would be. So if you know Photoshop, especially if you know Illustrator, a lot of things in Sketch are going to look familiar to you. They use a lot of the same sort of UI concepts and design patterns and some of the same features. It's somewhat compatible with Illustrator, not fully. Like you can't open a native Illustrator file in Sketch, but you can copy and paste out of Illustrator, and you can actually convert Illustrator files to SVG format, and those are readable by Sketch. It doesn't preserve everything, but it does preserve your layers and the editability of your elements. So you can get pretty far just with that level of compatibility if you already have projects in Illustrator that you want to port over. Sketch has a really active designer and developer community right now. It's kind of the hot new tool right now. So a lot of people are building plugins for it, and there's tons and tons of UI kits available on the web of things that people have built in Sketch. iOS libraries, Android libraries, icons, that kind of stuff. So there's a lot of resources out there for this tool. Sketch, we're not going to show this tonight, but there's a thing called Sketch Mirror, which you can run on your phone, and you can actually live demo your comps right on your phone, which is pretty cool. And finally, Sketch isn't that expensive. It's only $99, and it also has a free trial, so it's easy to check out. And you can get it from Bohemian Coding, which I believe is a startup here in the city, bohemiancoding.com/sketch. So that's Sketch 3. Hype 3 actually just came out a couple weeks ago. We did most of this presentation prep in Hype 2.5, but a week or two ago they released it. It's really cool. Hype 3 is a tool for building interactive web pages. That's what it does. It builds web pages and even websites. However, because it does it the way that it does it, it's awesome for just testing out animations, and it's really great for doing the types of HTML prototypes we're going to build tonight. The interface is really simple. Those of you who've tried out Flash or After Effects before, you'll notice when we get into it in a minute, it's got a timeline-based animation feature, which has some similarities to those other tools. As I mentioned earlier, it exports HTML pages, and everything it does in terms of animations is all JavaScript-based, and you don't have to know any JavaScript at all to use Hype, but if you do know JavaScript, you can add your own functions, and you can do some really powerful stuff with it, so that's a pretty neat feature. For these reasons, just at August, there's a lot of great prototyping tools out there, and some of them are awesome. But for us, we've really warmed up to Hype just because of all the features it has, the JavaScript functionality, how deeply you can customize certain things. And we've got a pretty fast workflow with it too. So Hype's used by web developers, UX designers, motion designers. It's used by all different types of people. Just like Sketch, Hype also has its own mirroring app. It's called Hype Reflect. This is really cool if you're doing gesture-based stuff that you want to evaluate on a touch screen that doesn't really work well on the web. And then finally, Hype's pretty cheap too. It's only $49, has a free trial. The version we're going to have open tonight is called Hype Pro, and it has a lot of new features like some physics stuff, but we're actually not going to need any of that to build the prototype we're doing tonight. So everything we're going to show you tonight, you can just do in the basic version of Hype 3. So yeah, so that's Sketch and Hype, and you can get Hype at tumult.com/hype. So let's get started. We're going to do this in kind of two stages. First, Leslie's going to do sort of a feature walkthrough of Sketch, and then after that, I'm going to build a prototype in Hype. But Leslie recently graduated with an MFA from Academy of Art a few months ago, and so she's more right, and she's probably definitely with Illustrator, more of an Illustrator and Photoshop expert than I am by far. But immediately when she started in August and January, we threw her into like a 3 or 4 week long project that was just deep dive into Sketch, like all day long, every day. So I think Leslie has a pretty good perspective on like the differences between those tools. And so Leslie's going to take a few minutes and walk through Sketch and talk about some of the cool features in Sketch. So Leslie, take it away.
Hi guys. So yeah, like Matt said, I hadn't ever used Sketch before I started working at August, and now that I've been using it for a few months, there are some things that I really like about it, reasons why I like it even more than Illustrator actually. So I'm going to first show you a little overview of the user interface, and then I'm going to walk you through some of the features of Sketch that I think you guys might like and that I really like as well. So here we have Sketch, the little document that I created. And we can see up here in the upper left corner are your pages. And pages are basically groups of artboards. It's really great for organizing sections of an application. That's what we use it for at August. So we have one master document that has every single screen in our app, and all the sections of the app are organized into pages. Then down here below that is where all of your artboards are. And underneath each of your artboards, you have all the layers that are in that artboard. And you can do things like turn them on and off, lock them. And then down here in the bottom lower corner is a filter. So you can search through all your artboards and all of your layers with keywords to find specific ones, which is really great if you have a very complicated file and you're looking for one specific layer in it. Then up here at the top is all the tools, and these are all really similar to tools that you're probably familiar with using in Illustrator. So you can create new elements, you can edit and transform them, you can perform pathfinding, all that kind of stuff is all going to be up here at the top. And then on the right side here is your inspector, and this is where you edit all the properties of your elements. So anything from fills, borders, shadows, etc. And it's all shown in one area here, which is nice. And then down below is where you can export things. And I'll talk a little bit more about exporting at the end of this, but you get to it from this area here. So now we'll move to a different page. And we'll talk about artboards. So artboards are exactly the same as they are in Illustrator with a couple of upgrades. So you can have an unlimited number of artboards, which you can't do in Illustrator. So you can see I've got like 200 of them here, and it doesn't affect the performance of the app at all. It's also really nice because when you make a new artboard, it comes with all of these presets for very common screen sizes, so iPhone, iPad, responsive web sizes. And it's also really easy to like move them around. I just made a new one. To move them around and rename them and resize them. So those are artboards. And layer styles. It's really nice because everything, all the styles for every single layer are shown in one spot. Whereas in Illustrator, it's like you have to go to different panels to see what's going on. So that's just nice visually. And also what's great is you can add multiple styles to one element. So like here I have a circle that has 3 separate borders on it, and you could do as many as you wanted. Here's one that has 3 separate fills, 3 separate shadows, so you can really, really easily get complex shading on elements that you can't really do very easily in Illustrator. Then we have plugins. So plugins are just things that you download and add to your application, and they sort of extend the feature set of Sketch. They're really easy to install. You just come into plugins, you find your plugins folder, and then you just copy and paste your plugin into this folder here, and it will show up. So there's a few that I really like to use. One is called Lorem Ipsum, and as you can probably imagine, it just fills any text box that you make with Lorem Ipsum text. So you can come in here, and I've just made Lorem Ipsum. There's another one called Toggle Specs, which is really great if you have a specific grid that you're using on all of your artboards, say you're comping up an application. So you can make a group of lines, however you want your grid to be, and then you call that line or that group specs, and then you can basically just toggle them off and on using Command L. So it's really great if you have guidelines that you want to copy and paste across multiple different artboards. And then the final one is called Measure Master, and this is really good for if you really quickly want to spec something up for a developer or a style guide, you can just select elements, and then they have sizes, margins, distances, properties, coordinates. So, and then it just automatically adds all these sizes on it. So you could really, really quickly make a style guide or a spec sheet for somebody. And then the last thing is exporting, and this is where I think Sketch is kind of far and away better than a lot of the other tools out there. It's really, really easy to export multiple file formats and file sizes just with one click. So for Matt and I, a lot of times we're exporting, 3 or 4 different sizes of something for different purposes, and we don't want to have to go through. And we're doing that across like lots and lots of screens at one time, and we don't want to have to go through and individually export each of those different settings. So with Sketch, we've got some screens from our app here. In my export settings, I can just add a new one and say I want to add a 2x JPEG, and I also need an EPS file. I just did it like that. And I can add suffixes to the end of them so I can differentiate between the files that I'm exporting. And then I just hit export, and they're all exported like that. So that's a very brief overview of Sketch. And I'm going to pass it back to Matt now, and he's going to start us on creating a prototype in Hype.
Thank you, Leslie. So now let's build a prototype. So we pulled a little bit of a cooking show trick here, and we already made our screens. Because A, they're not that complicated to build, and B, we're guessing that of the two tools, Hype is probably the one you're going to be less familiar with, or that's going to look less familiar to you. So the app demo that I gave you guys earlier, remember these screens? We had a keychain screen, a lock screen, users and activity. We built all of those. I also have a house header graphic, which you'll understand a little bit later why I went ahead and made that. But yeah, let's start here. So we'll go ahead and export our screens out of Sketch. So I just use Shift and select all these artboards. Oh, we changed all these export settings. Select all our screens. There we go. Let's go to export. And we'll put them in this prototype folder. All right. So this is Hype 3. And actually, I think we have Hype Pro, don't we? Is that what we're running? Anyway, we're only going to show the Hype 3 features tonight. They're very similar looking. The difference with Hype Pro is there's a few more features over here in the physics area. So first, I'll talk about the layout really fast. Just generally speaking, over here on the left, you've got all of your scenes. It creates a scene for you automatically when you start it up. Roughly speaking, your prototype will have a sort of a one-to-one relationship between a screen and a scene. Not always the case, as you'll see later, but generally speaking, that's how you do it. This right here is the canvas of our currently selected scene. Underneath it here, we have a timeline tool, and as I mentioned earlier, for those of you that are familiar with Flash or After Effects, this will look a little bit familiar, but all of the animations that we do inside of our scene, we will do with this timeline tool. And then on the right here, we have the inspector, and the inspector is where you change or adjust settings for just about everything in your prototype. So we have document level stuff, scene level, these guys are sort of element settings, text, and actions, which we'll get into in a minute. And we'll be using all these in a little bit, so you'll get a better sense. So, all right, let's jump right in. So first, I'm just going to name this scene keychain. I'm going to set the size of it. There we go. You see that? Yeah, let me make a new project and see if there's an issue. Trying again. knew that. All right, let's try it again. Width 640, height 1136. That's an iPhone 5 size screen, which is what we're building. All these panels look the same. All right, so we've got a keychain. Now we can hit the plus button here and make a second scene. It'll make one of the same size. We'll call that lock screen. All right, and now we can just start bringing in graphics. So I'm going to zoom out here a little bit. Actually, let me save this project really quickly too. We'll just call this August prototype. All right, so now we can just start inserting screens. So I'll bring in the keychain. And puts it right in the middle there. It also has these nice little snap tools, so it'll just snap things into place for you. Zoom out a little bit. There we go. Might help if I put it on the actual. There we go. Put your mouse backwards. You know, the thing with the, sorry, I'm like riffing now, but I never got used to the new Apple direction. Let's go to the lock screen, bring in our lock screen image. There we go. Still not right. Boom. Perfect. All right. So first thing I'm going to do is make just a really basic prototype. Nothing too fancy. I'm just going to make an animation or a transition, I'm sorry, where you can click back and forth between the keychain screen and the lock screen with a little transition. So what I like to do, rather than rebuild a bunch of graphics inside of Hype itself, I like to just create these invisible rectangles. And this is a little trick I use. And I can get pretty far with that and turn those into buttons. So in this prototype, I don't really want my users to worry about, which house they're clicking on. So I'm just going to make one giant button and make it invisible by setting the opacity to 0. You'll see a layer shows up here in the timeline. So I'm just going to name this house button. And then I'm going to add an action to it. So this panel over here that we looked at earlier, I'm just going to do on mouse click. I'm going to add an action, jump to scene. And then if you pick your scene, we'll go to lock screen. And then there's these built-in transitions that are really nifty. And we're just going to do a right to left with a really snappy timing of 0.3 seconds. And then on the lock screen, we're going to do the same thing, but we're going to make a back button. Same thing, make it invisible. Call that back button. Add an action. Jump to scene. Keychain. And this time we're going to go left to right. Okay, so right there we've already built a very basic prototype. It doesn't do much, but we did it quickly. And this will let us go back and forth between the keychain and the lock screen. So how do we preview this? How do we try this out? Well, there's this button up here at the top right. It says preview. So I can just click on the arrow, and it'll show all the browsers that I have installed. Also, it's got Leslie's phone because she's got Hype Reflect on it. We're not going to show that today, but you can just demo it right off your phone if you're on the same Wi-Fi network and you have that app open. So we're just going to pick Google Chrome, and boom. Here's our prototype. As you can see, it's embedded in an HTML page. And I can click on any of the houses, and it will take me to the lock screen. I can click the back button, and it will take me back to the keychain screen. So pretty cool. One of the first things that we notice is that, like many apps, our app has a lot of white space in it. It doesn't have any borders. So the default color of the HTML page that Hype creates is also white, so you end up with this effect where you don't really know where the prototype ends and the rest of the page begins. So what we do on pretty much every project right at the beginning is we edit the actual head of the HTML file, and that's easy to do. You just go to the document inspector, click on this edit head HTML button, and you get a new tab that's got the head tags that are HTML, and you can put whatever you want in there. So we have got some nifty CSS we're going to just paste in there. And just really quickly, this little piece of CSS just sets the background color of the web page to gray, and this here is adding a border around the content that we've got in our prototype. So if we preview it again, cool. So now we've got a nice background, we've got some nice contrast, it's much clearer, you know, this is the prototype and that's not. So that's editing the head of the HTML. So we have a really basic prototype we've already finished, but now I want to add a little bit more interactivity to it. So this lock screen circle that we have, that I demoed in the app earlier, we're going to actually make this animate. We're actually going to make this behave the way it behaves in our app. So to do that, first I'm going to go back to Sketch, and I'm going to take that layer that has the circle in it, and I'm just going to make that invisible. In Sketch, when you hover over a layer, you get a little eyeball icon that comes off on the side. Just click that. And then I'm going to re-export it. Oops. Replace this. Okay, so this is kind of a nice little feature of Hype. It automatically keeps track of whatever resources, whatever files you've got in your prototype. And if you change something, it will ask you if you want to update it or not. This is really neat if you have a really advanced or complicated project you're working on and you're like halfway through your prototype and suddenly you realize, oh, you know, I got the wrong color on a font, or there's some typo I've got on 10 different screens. You don't remember, you know, where things, you know, which asset you're using in which scene. So it'll just prompt you, do you want to update, you know, everything that's changed? And you can say yes. And if there's multiple ones, it gives you the checkboxes for each one. So I'll say yes. And cool. So it's just taking out our circle. So now I'm going to redraw what I just took out so that I can make it interactive. So first, I'm going to actually make a timeline in the timeline tool specifically for this lock animation. I'll call it lock animation. And I'm going to insert an ellipse. Check my cheat sheet for the hex code. There we go. So we're going to make this one green. Okay. And I'm going to get rid of the little border that it puts on there, and I'm going to set a size of 450 by 450. And as luck would have it in our app, happy coincidence, these circles happen to be in the exact center of our screen, so I can use the snap tools to position that. And hide this guy. We're going to call this green/red circle. You'll see why in a minute. We're going to change the color of it. Now I'm going to make the white circle. Same thing, insert an ellipse. Color is white. Set that to 270 by 270. Cool. So we've just rebuilt our graphics, but now we can manipulate these because they're shapes and height instead of part of the comp. All right. So now we get to the timeline tool down here, this little guy. And to make animations on the timeline, it's pretty straightforward. You have your timeline set at the starting point of where you want your animation to start. You click this record button here. And then you just go to where you want the end state of your animation to be, whether it's resizing something or moving something or whatever it is you're doing, and you just make the change. So what we're going to do is first we're going to animate this white circle, and I'm going to go almost to the 1 second mark. Our lock animation in the app is about 1 second. And I'm going to change the size almost to 0, not quite to 0. Center it again, and then right at the very, very end of that first second, I'm going to actually make it disappear. So the visual effect will be that it shrunk down to 0, but now I can still grab it with my mouse. That's why I did it that way. Oops. What did we do? Let's try that again. Sometimes you run into issues where I'm old school. I used to use Flash quite a bit, and I'm used to keyframes. Hype has keyframes, but they don't really have like a way to create one. So there we go. Try that again. And here to here. That's better. Now, what I'm actually doing here is I'm building both the lock and the unlock animations at the same time as one 2-second animation, which will be clear here in a moment. So now I'm doing the reverse of what I did a minute ago, and I'm making the circle bigger again for the second part of the animation. And there we go. So I'll stop recording. And so now I've got the white circle animating the way I want it to. Okay, this is the keyframe thing I was talking about earlier. Anyone online knows how to get around this, let me know. But it thinks I want to do the opacity change here too, which I don't. So I'm actually going to declare here that no, actually, I don't want the opacity to change yet until here. So now we should have it the way we want it. Yeah. I can preview it by clicking that play button. All right, so we got the white circle part done. This next bit should be pretty quick. All this green-red circle has to do now is just change color a couple times. So it starts off as green. Right at the beginning of the animation, we'll switch it to red. Look at my cheat sheet again for the hex color. Cool. It's going to stay that way until the second part of the animation. It's going to change back to green right at the beginning of that one. And then, once again, I have to say, no, actually, I didn't want that change to happen until here. So I'll make this one red again, and then it will all start to become clear, I promise. All right. So what I've actually done here is I've created both our unlock to lock animations and lock to unlock animations in our app as one 2-second timeline. So now I have to make it interactive, and I also got to make this pause and make it do the right transition at the right time. So to do that, this little area down here where it says timeline action, there's a little plus button. You can click on that, and at any point in your timeline, I can actually drag this around. You can make it trigger an action just by virtue of being in that spot. So we're going to create an action called pause timeline, and this is the timeline we're pausing, the lock animation. And we're good to go. We just put it here. So what's going to happen is I'm going to add an action to these two circles so that whenever you tap on it, it triggers this timeline. It's going to play this first part and then pause. And then when you tap it again, it's going to play the next part and then pause. And then when you tap it again, it's going to start at the beginning. So what you'll have is you'll have this back and forth lock animation, unlock animation. So the last piece to make that happen is just to select the two circles that the user might tap. Click actions. Add an action to each one to continue the timeline. If we selected start timeline, it would always start from the beginning, and that's not what we want. Do continue timeline, lock animation. All right, now fingers crossed, if I didn't screw up, we'll preview it and see what we've got. I think we've got it. All right, so our same prototype, start at the keychain screen, go to the lock screen, we can go back and forth. Now when I tap on the circle, cool. Now it animates from unlocked to locked. And if I tap on it again, it goes from lock to unlock. And you'll just go in a loop, it'll just repeat itself. So we're getting there, right? We've added some interactivity now. We've got some animation going on. Pretty neat. The last piece I'm going to work on is adding those activity and user screens to the right and left, making these buttons actually get you back and forth between them, and do it all without moving this top graphic, which is how things actually work in our app. And that's kind of an unconventional transition. You know, it's not the type of thing that out of the box most of these prototyping tools would be able to do. And it's not a default transition in Hype either. So I'm not going to just create new scenes for those. Instead, I'm going to do all that transition in this one scene. So first thing I'm going to do is actually bring in those graphics. So there's activity. I'm just going to put them off to the side. Users. And then now you'll see why I made this house header graphic earlier. I'm going to make a visual trick with it. put that up here. There we go. And so what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to add 4 buttons that are going to make this whole thing interact and move around. And I'm going to group everything on the screen except for that graphic I just put in and the back button, so that we can make some timelines and make all this animate, left and right without the top, with the visual effect of the top not moving. So to do that, first I want to actually put the back button at the very top. This does matter in your prototype, the layering. If the back button wasn't at the top, if something else was on top of it, you wouldn't be able to get to it when you actually tapped on it. Now I'm going to make 4 buttons really quick, an invisible button trick. I'll just copy and paste these and make 1 for each of these tappable elements. Do my little invisibility trick. And I'm going to name them real fast so I can keep track of them. I'll call this block right. Users left. Block left. And activity right. And so that I can animate all this stuff as a group, I'm actually going to make them into a group. Everything except for that house header and back button that I mentioned earlier. So we'll take all this stuff, select it in the timeline. There it is. We'll just call this movable. And I'm going to make 2 timelines really quick. You can ask me in the Q&A why I need 2 timelines, but just in the interest of time, I'm going to do it. I'm going to make one, and I'm going to call it locked to activity. And I'm going to make one called lock to users. And we're almost done with this part. Now all I got to do is add actions to these buttons to make things move around the right way. Well, actually, there's one more thing I got to do, which is actually animate these timelines. So lock to activity, press the record button again, like I said earlier. And since I've made this a group and I've got it selected, I can just make a quick animation here. I can pull this whole thing, including the buttons, over to where I want it. There we go. Also, that didn't actually go. Try that again. That transition, I did something wrong. Just undo it. How about that? I'm amazing at this, I swear, normally. Alright, we got that far. Oh man, I have to do this all over again. I don't think anyone wants to sit through that. I might have to cut that layer. I've got the group. I've got the buttons defined. Alright, let's make the animation again. I did something wrong, but I'm not sure what it was, but that happens. So, lock to activity. Let's select this whole group just to be safe. And then move a little bit down the timeline. Yeah, see, as a group, it's a lot easier to snap things in place. Get myself started. That might be good. Let's take a look. That works. So yeah, so we have one animation that goes this way, and then we just need another one that goes from locks to users. It goes the other way. So once again, click record, move to the end. And I'm paranoid now because I'm not sure what I did wrong, so I'm just going to select everything and move it the other way. So much easier when you get them. Let's see how that works. Yeah, not possible. Brilliant. There we go. Okay, cool. Almost done with this part. Now all I got to do is take the 4 buttons and add actions to them, and we should be good to go, knock on wood. So going back to the beginning of this animation. So yeah, I'm just going to do the same action on each one of these, basically. This button right here is going to start the lock to users timeline. When I click on it. So I'm actually going to select continue timeline. Locks to users, looks good. This one's going to do the exact same thing, but it's just going to go in reverse. Lock to users in reverse. And then on this side, this time it's locked to activity. And finally, locked to activity in reverse. Okay, fingers crossed, or drum roll or something. Click the preview button. All right, so keychain, lock screen, keychain, lock screen, tap the lock, lock locks, lock unlocks, and now we can tap the buttons and we go from the user screen to the lock screen to the activity screen and back without the top moving. So yeah, so that's, I'm not sure how long that took, 20, 25 minutes, but you can get pretty far pretty quickly. Once you have a good workflow in here, you can do custom animations, you can do some unconventional transitions, and that sort of stuff. And there's one more thing we want to show you guys, and Leslie's going to come over and show you how we can do something even more advanced here if you know just a little bit of JavaScript. Leslie?
All right. So like Matt said, we can add JavaScript to our prototypes, and this can give us even more interactivity and more dynamic interactions in our prototypes than we could get with just type by itself. So I'm going to show you guys how. So in our app, every time you lock and unlock your door, or somebody else locks and unlocks your door, a new activity is added to your activity feed. We want this prototype to act a little bit more realistically, so that it actually does that. A new entry is added every time that we lock and unlock this. But I'm not sure, what everybody's level of JavaScript knowledge is. Some people might know it, some people might not. So I'm not going to make this a JavaScript lesson. I'm just going to kind of show you something you can do that's really, excuse me, that's really cool. And if you know JavaScript, then you can add it to your prototypes. And if you don't, then hopefully this will inspire you to learn JavaScript. So first, before we get to the actual code, we need to fix some things in here so that we can add the code. So we need to update this activity image so that it's blank, because we don't want there to be anything in it. We want to add our own images into it. So there's this resources folder in Hype, and this is where it keeps all of the images and assets that you are using. So we're going to update this activity image to a different one that I have that is blank. And we're also going to add in our locked and unlocked activity assets, because we will need to reference them in our code later. Cool, so we have that. And what's great is that you can write vanilla JavaScript in here, but you can also reference external JavaScript libraries. So for this example, I'm going to be using jQuery. So you can add jQuery or any other external library by also adding it as a resource. So I have jQuery right here. And it will automatically link it in the head of your HTML. You just want to make sure that this little item is checked off here at the bottom. So we're going to be using the jQuery method append. And for that, we need something that we can append these images to. And right now, all we have on this screen is one background image. So if we appended to them, they would append off the bottom of the screen and we wouldn't see them. So we're going to use Matt's handy dandy blank rectangle trick and append our images to that. So we're going to add a rectangle to the screen. And then we're going to come back to our inspector panel over here, and we're going to give it a fill of none. And then we need a way to reference it in the jQuery. So there's this panel called the identity panel, and this is where you can give elements unique IDs, and you can also give them reusable classes. So we're going to give this an ID of activity feed. And I think with that, we are ready to start doing actual code. So just like Matt added actions, to the lock circle so that every time you tap on it, it does something. You can also add an action of every time you tap on something, a JavaScript function runs. So we're going to go to our actions panel, and we are going to go back to the main timeline. One second. We got to make sure that this rectangle is in the right place. So this needs to be in our movable group so that it moves along with the other animations that Matt made earlier. So now we can go back to the main timeline. And sorry guys, this is in the wrong spot. Okay, there we go, now it's in the right place. So we're going to grab our two circles, and we're going to add another action to it, and this is going to be run JavaScript. And we haven't written any JavaScript yet, so there's no functions in here. So we can click New Function, and it gives us a new tab, and it gives us the structure for a JavaScript function. And all that we have to do is name it, and then write the code in between the brackets that we want to run, and it will work. So we're going to name this function add activity. And first, so you can write JavaScript here. You can also write JavaScript in the head tag of the HTML. And we need to declare a variable first. If you don't know JavaScript, I'm sorry, this is going to be the boring part. It might be boring even if you do know. So we're just setting a global variable of unlocked to equal true. And basically what we're going to do is we're going to toggle that back and forth. And based on the whether it's true or false, we're going to do something differently. So now we're going to go back to add activity. And to save time, I've just written this already. And I'm going to copy and paste it so you guys don't have to sit here and watch me type that forever. So we just have an if statement here. It's basically checking to see whether that variable is true or false. And then if it is true, it's setting it to false, and it's adding the locked image to the screen. And then if it's false, it's setting it to true and adding the unlocked image to the screen. So hopefully if I've done everything right and I haven't misspelled anything, it should work. So we're going to preview it. And got our empty activity feed right here, and then we're going to lock the door, and nothing happened. It's this thing though. This is Spelling is probably what happened. I don't think that would do anything though. This went like perfectly every time that we practiced it. And then of course, as soon as we get up in front of all of you, yeah. But we're going to figure out what went wrong because half of making prototypes, well not half, but a lot of it sometimes is debugging and troubleshooting. So it's in the group. I've got it here. It should be in the right spot. It's called Activity Feed. And in here we are referencing Activity Feed to... Yes, I did. Yeah. You know what we're going to do? We're going to delete this and we're going to try it again. So we're going to add another rectangle. We're just going to try it again and see if this works because maybe I just put it in the wrong spot. Just too advanced. I take back what I said earlier. This is probably the really boring part. Okay. So we're going to name it Activity Feed. And we're going to put it inside of this so that it moves with everything. I don't know why. See, this is the thing, is normally when I put it inside that group, it takes on. Oh, now I understand what you're saying. Alright. I think we can fix this now. Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm gonna. Oh no, did I just do that right? Here? Okay, alright. Let's try this again. Take two. Empty? Press your fingers. Yay! So now when you lock, it adds this locked activity, and then when we come back and we unlock it, it will add the unlocked activity. So it behaves a lot more like the actual application does, which is great for user testing if you want it to be more realistic. So yeah, that's how you can add JavaScript. That's just one thing you can do. There's a million other things you can do. So now I'm going to pass it back to Matt to wrap things up.
It's totally my fault. It's something I did with the groups. I have no idea what it is, but I'll be very curious to check it out in a little bit and see what it was. Okay, so it's basically all we got. Just a couple last second things here before we go to the Q&A. Bunch of resources, and I'll share a link with you guys here in a moment. But there's tons and tons and tons of information online about Sketch and Hype. Both websites have their own tutorials, their own videos, and there's lots and lots of community stuff. You know, pretty much everywhere you look, YouTube, there's a lot of design articles about those products. But here's some cool links we found to lots of resources about Sketch and Hype. And yeah, this not very user-friendly bit.ly link will take you to the presentation. Sorry, I shared it on Google Docs, and that was the best way to give you guys a link. But we'll leave this up for a little bit so you guys can write it down if you want the slides. Yeah, so that's building prototypes with Sketch and Hype. So we'll hand it off for questions. And once again, if you have any questions and you haven't written any yet, you just go on Twitter and use the hashtag AskAugustUX, or you can use the Academy of Art online live stream tool to send stuff over to Dina. So, Dina, anything interesting? Okay.
He asks, why hype and not origami, form, or farmer?
Wow. So origami, farmer. I'm sure those are like incredible tools. I'm not familiar intimately with either or with any of those actually. And here's the thing. It's probably just my ignorance on it, but there are so many tools out right now. The design team over at Fuse Project that we work with, there's a couple guys that we talk to about prototypes a lot, and they did an internal survey of like 15 different tools. Proto.io, Adobe Edge Animate. There's just a slew of them that I know that I'm not remembering either. There very well may be other prototyping tools out there, some that maybe not even launched yet, that do amazing stuff just like this. A lot of it comes down to personal preference. It's not always about a bullet list of features. For us, at least for me, I can say it's more about a workflow that you're comfortable with. Honestly, part of the reason I gave a shout out to my friend Brian Dills at the beginning of the presentation was because I was still using Fireworks as my go-to design tool. I used that thing for like 10 years straight. Just loved it. It was just like nothing else did what Fireworks did. You could make HTML prototypes with that back before anybody knew what that meant. Did slices, just a really robust, cool tool. It's not really well supported anymore by Adobe, and it hasn't really been updated much lately. But I just had such a good workflow in it, and I just knew it backwards and forwards, and knew how to do everything in it, that I just, I was like, well, why should I use anything else? It's just what I'm comfortable with. I want to go back and find out what those tools are, because they're probably really cool. I just need to go check them out. But I guess that's my answer is, whatever floats your boat. But we like this one.
Okay, next question. What's the most challenging thing about your workflow at August?
Good question. I'll give you my answer, and then if Leslie wants to add something, I'll hand it over to her too. Not so much about August specifically, but just in general in your career as a UX designer, you'll find that a large percentage of your time is actually spent talking to people and reviewing designs and debating designs and advocating for your designs and being willing to go back to the drawing board when your design is rejected or tweaked or whatever. Yeah, sure, you're building comps and whatever, prototypes and graphics or whatever your day-to-day, workflow is. But in my personal workflow, and I love it, it's not a bad thing. It's just that unlike a lot of other disciplines where, as a developer, maybe people that aren't developers don't really have a strong opinion about, how you wrote your code or something. But as a designer, everyone has an opinion about your work, and you got to embrace that and be cool with that, and be willing to talk about your work and defend your work, and go back and change things when you get good suggestions. So, as far as challenging, I don't know if that answers the question, but it definitely is where a lot of our time and effort is put in, is in working with people and actually talking through the work.
Yeah, my answer is not quite as grand as Matt's. But I think one of the challenges is when you're working on a team and you're trying to collaborate, but also maintain a good organization within your files and stuff. So we have a master file that we have all of our comps in, and then we both have our own personal files, and we're constantly having to ask each other for things and figure out who did what when, and so I think that's kind of, as far as workflow goes on a day-to-day basis, one of the more challenging things. So if anybody knows of any good collaboration tools that could help us with that, let me know.
Or versioning software that manages Sketch stuff automatically. Yeah.
So next question is, how does one apply for a design internship in August, and is there a deadline to apply? And I guess I can answer that one.
I think Dina, yeah.
So there, if you are interested in an internship, you're more than welcome to send me a resume and a profile on your background, dina@august.com. There is no deadline. We do welcome, any internships, and Matt is part of the selection committee. So, if you have a chance to come and speak to him after the presentation, please do so. What's in store for August and other home devices? Home battery? Question mark.
Oh, is this referring to the Elon Musk? I think we were talking about this on the way over here, the home battery thing. Who knows? Gosh, I don't know. Your guess is as good as mine. There's definitely a lot more action and interest in the media in the home automation space in general now, I would say, than a couple years ago. And there's a lot of really cool stuff happening. It's a good question. I think the next, and this is just my opinion, not August's opinion or anything like that, but just me personally. I think the next phase in the space is going to be figuring out platforms and figuring out integrations and making that less messy. I mean, you've got a lot of really cool systems out there right now. There's If This Then That, and there's, gosh, I don't even know. There's Zigbee and Revolve and SmartThings, and Apple's going to do HomeKit, and people are working on really cool individual, home automation products right now. But it's still a lot of work, and it's still pretty wonky to get them to talk to each other and to do intuitive things, things that actually make sense at the right moment. And that aren't just triggered, with a button and a app. So that's my take on it. I don't know. She's not going there. Okay. Oh yeah, we'll put our thumb on the scale. Yeah, we have awesome August trucker hats for anybody that asks questions. So free swag. So. Anything specifically about Sketch or Hype you guys are curious about? We're not the gurus per se, but we do have some experience in it. Oh yeah? Okay.
I have a visual background. Hype makes sense to me. Can you make a real app in it or just prototype?
Say that again? I'm sorry.
I have a visual background. Hype makes sense to me. Can you make a real app in it or just prototype?
Yeah, that's a great question, actually. So Hype doesn't actually, as far as I know, they don't really market themselves heavily as a prototyping tool per se. I think if you dig into their literature a little bit, it'll start talking about that. But especially with Hype 3, it is a tool for making full-on websites. So there's stuff we didn't show you at all today that's included in Hype Pro. There's responsive web stuff that they've added in. There's really complex physics. You can do cool gravity things with making things bounce, and especially with the JavaScript, you can have dynamic pages. They don't have to be static. So from a front end standpoint, not counting all your database stuff and hosting and all that, but yeah, I think you could build definitely a portfolio site. I would say at minimum, if you wanted to have if you wanted to blend the examples of your design skills into your actual portfolio page, I think that's definitely something you could explore. So yeah, and there's probably people that know way more than we do talking about this online. I'll bet if you did some Googling, you could find out some communities that are building really awesome, robust stuff with Hype. Yeah.
This versioning tool for Sketch equals. No, that's not even a question.
Yeah, I think they're answering that question. Yeah. Oh. GitHub. Yeah. Okay, that's fair. That's fair. That's fair. Actually, our developers at work are harassing us constantly to just bite the bullet and plug into GitHub. So we should do that.
Yeah, but I don't think that you can actually do that with Sketch files specifically. With assets you can, but I was talking more about actual Sketch files itself. But thank you for the suggestion.
Yeah, we use it just to clarify what we meant by that is we basically use Dropbox for sharing our stuff, and these master files, sometimes two of us will open the file without knowing the other person's in that file, and if you make any changes, it just automatically branches and makes a conflicted copy. And then to avoid that problem, we have our own personal files that we copy out of it. So yeah, we definitely need to research a workflow for that. Or we can just keep one master copy and multiple people can edit it at the same time.
Are there any other questions?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great question. I'm going to repeat that because it wasn't on mic. He was asking about swipe behavior. That's an excellent question. Just really quickly in Hype. We didn't talk about that just in the interest of time, just because we didn't have much was long enough already. But you could definitely do gesture support. There's a couple spots. So first of all, there's scene actions, which we didn't even get into, but you can do really cool stuff like when a scene loads or when a user does a certain action, like a key press. But some of the actions that are supported are swipe actions, and these are screen level swipe actions. So it's not like dragging something. It's like you do a swipe gesture anywhere on the screen, right to left, up to down. You can trigger an animation that way, and we do use that in our prototype sometimes. And we could have built it into this prototype, but because of the complexity, I'm gonna, even as simple as that one was, I screwed part of it up. So imagine what would happen if I was trying to do it. No, just kidding. You can definitely add those gestures on a scene level, and then at the action level, you can do drags, which can be made to perform similar to a swipe gesture. But yeah, that's the short answer for that. Is there is definitely gesture support, but they've also got the more traditional desktop stuff like mouse up and mouse over, which aren't relevant on mobile. Yeah, so the question was about multiple timelines. We could talk about that real quick. Yeah, so I can tell you what I know. Oh, you mean why I made 2 timelines specifically on the, thanks for reminding me. Yeah, so there's a little, so we're going to get into the weeds here for just a second, but just to explain it. So the reason why I didn't make this animation all one timeline. We could have done that. In fact, I actually tried that at first when we were prepping for this. We could have made just one timeline like we did for the lock animation, and we could have started it all off with, like, let's say the activity screen being the beginning, and then the whole thing animating all the way through the screen and then through the user's screen. But the glitch there, and there might be a workaround for this, I just couldn't think of one, is that when you first load a scene, it will always load right to the 0. And then once it's loaded, it'll look for any scene actions. And if you put an action in at the beginning that says, like jump to the middle or something, it won't do it right when it loads the scene. There'll be like a split second. So when I first tried it out as one overall timeline, because this lock screen is in the middle and this one's on the left and this one's on the right, there would be a little split second jump where it would show the activity screen for like a split second, and then it would hop over to the lock screen. So it just seemed like the most obvious, graceful way to get around that problem. But it had to do specifically with this unorthodox animation where we start off in the center of 2 screens rather than on the left or on the right. If that makes sense. So I'm sure there's more ways to do it, which is another one of the cool things about Hype. There's not just one way to do it. You can try different approaches. I didn't catch the beginning of that. Can you tell me? The lock animation? What about it again? I'm sorry.
So when we imported those comps into Hype, they're just images. So in order to manipulate that circle in the center, we have to recreate it so that we can change the size and change the color. Otherwise, it's just a static image in the background. So that's why we cut it out and then redrew it. I don't think so, because this is all exporting to HTML. So I think that would be tricky.
Now you could export. One option would have been to export the graphics from the comps as individual slices at the beginning, and then we could have worked with the individual items in the screen. But like I said earlier, I'm kind of lazy, so like I try to default to like a full screen comp graphic whenever possible, and only draw shapes and do that sort of stuff when I have to. Another reason why that's nice is that that auto update or whatever it's called feature that Hype has when you change one of the source files and it prompts you if you want to update it. The less individual graphics you're pulling in, the more manageable that flow is, if that makes sense. Because now I only got to worry about, like in that example I used where like, oh, I used the wrong font color, or I had a typo or whatever. I know all I have to do is go back and change it in the comps and just re-export everything, and everything will export correctly. So it's trying to just keep things simpler as well.
Any other questions from the audience?
How large is the design team? It's a good question. So the internal UX team in August is right now myself and Leslie, and Kevin, who's in the audience, is our intern right now. So it's a really small team. However, we work in very close partnership with Fuse Project, which is an outside design firm run by Yves Bihar. And we collaborate with them quite a bit, and they have a lot of resources and stuff on their end too. So overall, it's a decent sized group of people, but actually at August itself, like it's a pretty small team. It's us, basically.
Any other questions from the audience?
Do you want to take that? Yeah, Leslie, come in.
I think a lot of the ones that I pointed out at the beginning are really great. The ability to have multiple styles on an element, so you can add more than one border, you can add more than one fill, more than one shadow, allows you to create complex things very quickly. And all of that is managed in one area of the UI. So basically, I think of Sketch as like a stripped down version of Illustrator. It's all of the things that you probably already use in Illustrator all the time, and all the stuff that you don't use is not there anymore. So I think that's probably one of the biggest highlights of it.
It has some Photoshop features too, it blends some of that stuff into. But yeah, but I agree.
And also exporting in Sketch is way nicer than in Illustrator. When I first started, we were doing a lot of work with our Android app, and for Android, you have to export lots of different sizes of assets, because depending on the resolution of the Android phone screen, you have to use a different asset. And to do it in Illustrator, I would have had to go in by hand and export each of those different settings, which would have been really time consuming and a pain. So being able to do that basically with one click is awesome. So
yeah, we were going to put that in the presentation originally, but it was getting too long anyway. But yeah, definitely asset management, and not just on iOS too now with iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. Now you've got 1x, 2x, and 3x assets, and we keep all of our assets for the app. We have an iOS file and an Android file where it's just assets, and when we export, we can just select everything all at once, and we've already got those multiple export settings applied to all the artboards. And so we just with this one click, we just spit it all out, which is pretty awesome.
Are there any other questions from the audience?
The question was, how long is the trial subscription for? If I remember correctly, I think it's 2 weeks for Sketch and then 30 days for Hype. That sounds right. But I mean, on their website they'll tell you. But I think that's what it is. Yeah.
So we have a question here regarding working at a startup. Have you had any challenges working with investors?
Not me personally.
The investors really don't get involved. I mean, it's more of a relationship between the CEO and the investor, so it doesn't affect any of the teams at August, at least. Are there any other questions in the audience? I think we're set here as well.
Cool. Well, thank you so much, guys. Just once again here at the end, put up the link for those of you that were interested in the slides. So give Sketch and Hype a try, see what you think, compare it to your experience with other apps, and see if it's got a workflow that works for you. Now, after this, I'm going to have to go try Origami and some of the other ones that or ask about on Twitter. Now I'm really curious. Yeah, anybody who has questions in the audience, come on down, and we've got and other people who want to try it. Yeah, we've got some free swag for you down here. So thank you very much.